Beth Schaefer, and I'm president of the League of Women Voters of the Greater Dayton area. The League is fully committed to providing important and trusted information to assist voters in making informed choices when they go to vote. To that end, tonight's program is being recorded by DATV. For over 100 years, the League of Women Voters' mission has been to encourage informed and active participation in government. We're nonpartisan in that we do not endorse or oppose any candidate or party, but we are political, and we do take positions on issues that impact voting rights and democracy. The League of Women Voters has long-standing positions supporting fair districts. A citizen's proposed amendment to the Ohio Constitution addressing the issue of gerrymandering will be on the ballot in November. We are fortunate to have former Ohio Supreme Court Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor here tonight to share with us what gerrymandering is and to actually discuss the proposed Citizens Not Politicians Amendment. We are also pleased that Josh Schweigert with the Dayton Daily News has agreed to be our moderator this evening. Before we get into the introductions, here's what you can expect tonight. The former Chief Justice will present her remarks, after which our moderator will have the opportunity to ask questions that he has determined that would be helpful to bring better understanding and clarity to the whole issue of redistricting and gerrymandering. Questions from the audience will have to be in writing. That's just a tradition with the League of Women Voters. We will not take anything from the floor. And we have passed out index cards, but if you didn't get one and you would like to have one, just raise your hand. We have volunteers who will circulate. When you have completed writing your question, just hold your card up and a volunteer will magically appear and bring those questions to the moderator. We hope to get to as many of these as time permits. As I mentioned, our moderator tonight is Josh Schweigert. Josh is the editor for Investigations and Solution Journalism with the Dayton Daily News. His stories have focused on government waste, fraud, abuse, and accountability in Southwest Ohio, as well as the State House and the U.S. Capitol. He has won many professional awards for his investigative reporting. He has worked with the Cox Media Group since 2007, and in addition to writing for the Dayton Daily News, he has covered Clark County government for the Springfield News and Butler County government for the Hamilton Journal News and Middletown Journal. He's a graduate of Wright State University and Wayne High School in Huber Heights. Sharon Davies is the president and CEO of the Charles F. Kettering Foundation, where she leads a group of researchers, communicators, and thought leaders who are ready to meet this moment and protect democratic ideals. The foundation works to inspire and connect individuals and organizations to advance thriving and inclusive democracies around the globe. We are honored that Sharon is here tonight to introduce former Ohio Supreme Court Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor to you.
All right, good evening. So thank you so much, Beth. It's a pleasure to be here and a true privilege to be in partnership with the League of Women Voters in helping to sponsor this conversation tonight. Those of you who are familiar with the Charles F. Kettering Foundation know that we are almost 100 years old. Founded in Dayton by Charles F. Kettering himself in 1927. And most people in this area associate today the name Kettering with health. And in a way, that is true for the Charles F. Kettering Foundation, but it is actually the health of democracy that is our exclusive concern, both domestically and around the world. So anything that affects democracy, that threatens democracy, which is, as we all know, a form of governance where the people themselves reserve to themselves the power to govern. We do it very often through our elected representatives, but we expect them to be accountable to us, the people. So anything that threatens government accountability by things like the concept of gerrymandering would be an issue that would be of concern to the Kettering Foundation. Now, the Kettering Foundation, like the League of Women Voters, is a nonpartisan organization. We cannot lobby any member of our community to vote in any particular way. We do not endorse particular candidates. We do not oppose them or fund them. But that does not mean that we are neutral on the conversation of democracy. We are not neutral. We are a pro-democracy organization. And we think that a conversation about gerrymandering that helps Ohio voters understand why is it that over 700,000 Ohioans decide to sign a petition to put something on the ballot in November that concerns gerrymandering. What is this organization, Citizens Not Politicians, actually all about? How should we think about it? There is no better person to hear from about that than the woman that is seated to my far right, former Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor. Maureen O'Connor was on the Supreme Court of Ohio that talked about and dealt with many cases that concerned gerrymandering or allegations of gerrymandering in improper, unfair maps that were drawn again and again and again by Ohio politicians. And she, a lifelong Republican, was adamant in her refusal to accept what appeared to her in the court to be unfair maps. She continues that today. This is a person that Ohio knows very well. Before she was on the Ohio Supreme Court and led that, she was also the lieutenant governor of our state in the Taft administration. And since she has stepped down from the court, she has been relentless in helping people understand what is at stake in November with this citizen-led ballot. We are indebted to her for helping to educate all of us on what Citizens Not Politicians is all about, so that we can make informed decisions as voters, as all of us have the responsibility to do as American citizens. So with that, I would just ask you to help to welcome Justice O'Connor, who stands as a tremendous example for our community on what principled leadership looks like in the fight for democracy that truly serves the people of our community. She will give her remarks from her chair. Welcome, Chief Justice.
Can you hear me now? That work? Okay, great. Thank you. Sharon Beth, thank you for your remarks, the introduction. I'm so pleased to be invited here to speak. The League of Women Voters, there's not an organization that I can think of that has been more consistent in their involvement for fair government. We have many supporters of this initiative, many collaborations, many organizations, but I have to, champion right off the bat the League of Women Voters and Common Cause, who have been relentless in their fight against rigged maps, gerrymandering. They've been there for over 10, maybe 15 years, fighting this. So they are to be commended, and we couldn't do what we're doing if we didn't have groups like the League of Women Voters and Common Cause and so many other initiatives and organizations and even private individuals. Just the support has been overwhelming. I want to start by saying that gerrymandering has no place in government in how our districts are drawn and how our representatives are chosen. But I also want to emphasize that this is not a Republican problem alone or a Democratic problem alone. It is bipartisan in its form. And in Ohio, currently, we happen to have a majority Republicans, but we've had Democrats in control, and they had issues as well. I point, for example, to the state of New York. New York, as you know, I keep hearing all the time, especially from the critics of this initiative, that, oh, you're just like New York. You know, you have all those New York friends and all that New York support. Well, let me say, first of all, New York legislature, primarily, majority Democrat, they drafted a map, I think about 2 years ago, and it was extensively gerrymandered. So it was challenged in front of their Supreme Court. Now, the beauty with their Supreme Court as opposed to our Supreme Court is that the court had the ability to redraw the maps in the Ohio Supreme Court based on the amendments were passed in 2015 and 2018. It explicitly says the court shall have no authority to draw maps. Highly unusual, but that's what we have in our Constitution now. Getting back to New York, the Supreme Court, that the members were principally appointed by governors, Democratic governors, they ruled that the maps that were passed by the Democratic legislature were unconstitutional and sent them back to the drawing board. And so that happens throughout the country. So it's not as I said, an R thing, a D thing exclusively. It's bipartisan. And it's not a recent phenomenon either. We know that gerrymandering was a problem in Ohio almost from the very beginning. The origin of our government in Ohio, obviously, we came from the Northwest Territory. The Northwest Territory, there was I guess a governor is what they would call him, and that was a gentleman named Mr. Sinclair, actually General Sinclair. And he was an autocrat. He was just totally disregarded the legislature, the territorial legislature, and he just, I could tell you stories about him, but he wasn't a very good administrator, and he was a horrible general because he led the troops against the Native Americans in Ohio and was responsible for, the battle's called the Battle of 1,000 Deaths, because that's how many settlers and I'm going to use the term white people were, their lives were lost in this battle. And the guy was just clueless. So anyway, he had no use for the legislature, and he was an autocrat. And make a long story short, he fought the President Jefferson wanting to make Ohio a state at the time. He lost his job over that. But when the legislature came together to draft the very first constitution for the state of Ohio, they unfortunately, gave too much power to the legislature. They did that because they did not want to empower a governor. So we had a weak governor originally in the 1803 Constitution, and we had a super strong legislature. I imagine the folks in Columbus would love to have that again, but but fortunately we evolved. And what was the problem with the legislature in the first iteration of our Constitution? Gerrymandering. And it was the worst kind of gerrymandering because we had this big expanse of territory, and whenever they wanted to increase their authority, their power, get some of their friends into the legislature, they just carved out another county, and then they had a county government, and then of course they had to fill that county government. So it was like, you can see where I'm going with the problem. So fast forward, we're in the 1850s, we've got a new constitution. That constitution introduces the concept of balance. We have 3 co-equal branches of government, and it's working pretty well. But towards the end of the 1800s, gerrymandering starts to rear its ugly head again. We go into 1912, and that's when the progressives were flexing their political muscles. They had the Constitutional Convention. Out of the Constitutional Convention came a handful of amendments for the Constitution. Not all of them were passed by the citizens, but those that were introduced, and probably the most important in my estimation that was introduced, was the ability for citizens to have an initiative to change the Constitution, to amend the Constitution, and it is through the will of the citizens, not the approval of the legislature or the governor, but it's the activity of the citizens of Ohio. There's only about 18 states in this country that have that ability, so we're very, very fortunate in Ohio to have the citizens' initiative in order to amend our Constitution. And I'm sure if you've been paying attention, I know you all have been paying attention as to the hoops that we had to jump through in order to get this ballot measure on for November 5th. The collection of signatures, and again, I'm going to harken back to the League of Women Voters and the Common Cause and all of the organizations who stood out in the cold, the rain, and all weather in parking lots and shopping malls, etc., to ask people to sign. Please, will you sign this petition? The beauty of it, you didn't have to be, it wasn't specifically for a candidate, so you didn't have to have, your R or D registration. Everybody could sign it, and everybody did sign it. It seemed we had 731,000 signatures that we turned in. The Secretary of State gave us a blessing on over 550,000 of those signatures. Now, mind you, we only needed to collect 414,000 signatures. So, and then the other requirement, obviously, is that half of the counties, 44 counties, you had to have signatures that represented 5% of the voters of that county based on the number of ballots that were cast for the governor in the previous gubernatorial election. So you had to have 44. We turned in, we thought 57, but it turned out 58. When they got done looking at it, 58 counties, that is like a record that we turned in. And, I'm not taking any credit whatsoever for it. It was folks like you that I give all the credit for that effort being so successful and setting, those kind of records. So anyway, we have the 1912 amendment, again, by the progressives. They were very progressive for the time. They just weren't progressive enough to put women's suffrage on the ballot, out of that constitutional amendment. In fact, there was if you read the documentary of what was being said at that, they did consider suffrage, and it was, what are we going to do to give women the vote? Can you imagine if we give women the vote, then they're going to be elected. And this is actually, I'm not making this up. They're going to want to be elected. And then, oh my gosh, can you imagine a woman on the Supreme Court? Can you imagine a Chief Justice, a woman Chief Justice? This is actually in black and white. I read this after I became Chief Justice. And I thought, man, those guys are spinning in their coffins right now. Wearing the satin out of the inside of those coffins. But anyway, that's just a little aside so. All right, we're blessed that we had progressives, that we've had this for over 100 years, and it has worked well for the state of Ohio. And we used this provision, so we are able to put this ballot measure on to reform redistricting in Ohio, to take it away from the politicians, and I think you all know that this is currently, because we have the two amendments, 2015, 2018, they were passed resoundingly by the citizens of Ohio, well over 70% of the vote. There was absolutely no opposition to those ballot measures. Academia, both political parties, the media, you name it, everybody was thinking that this was the best thing since chocolate milk and sliced bread. But you know what? It wasn't, because there was, I like to say, a Trojan horse that was embedded in these amendments, and that was the composition of the Redistricting Commission. Who's on the Redistricting Commission? By the Constitution, the governor, the Secretary of State, the auditor, and then 4 legislators, 2 members of the majority party of the House and the Senate, and the same for the minority party, House and Senate. So we've got 7 politicians. And it is an innate conflict of interest. They can't help themselves. Whether they're Ds or Rs, they can't help themselves to retain power, to expand power, to do what is best for party over citizens. And that's exactly what we've seen in the implementation of those 2 amendments, and both 12 and 15 and 18. And I don't have to tell you, if you've been obviously reading about it and paying attention, but there were 7 maps that were submitted to the Supreme Court. Why did they come to the Supreme Court after they, were created by the Redistricting Commission? Because they were challenged in the, a court of law, and it's provided for that goes to the Supreme Court. So, of course, we're reviewing them, 7 members of the Supreme Court. It was abundantly clear from the very beginning that the language of the constitutional amendments was not being followed. It was not good language to begin with, because it has in it, which I like to call weasel words, like the commission shall attempt to draw a map that comports with, this and this and this. Shall attempt. Okay, we tried, we just couldn't do it. Is that okay? Yeah, you got an A for effort. No, that's not the way it works. But that was their interpretation, and it was the interpretation of several members on the court. When we reviewed these, there were 4 members who cast votes and said that unconstitutional 7 times, and then there were 3 members on the court that said that we were overstepping the 4 majority, overstepping that, we're usurping the authority of the legislature, acting contrary to the Constitution, etc. Anyway, it prevailed, and so you might ask yourself, why then did we have unconstitutional maps in 2022 when we had to go to the ballot in November of 22? The reason you had it is because there was a parallel lawsuit filed with the federal court, and a 3-member panel of federal judges, 2 out of the 3 said to the commission, Redistricting Commission, okay, you've been giving these unconstitutional maps to the Supreme Court. They've declared them unconstitutional. But Secretary LaRose makes a good point. We've got to have a map, and we've got to have it by a certain date because we have to, have these ballots printed, and they have to be going overseas, and so the court says, if you don't come up with a constitutional map, Redistricting Commission, by May 31st, Ohio's going to have to use the 3rd map that you drew. Okay, that's already, we're past the 3rd map, right? We're on maps 4 and 5 at this point. But so what do you think the incentive was for the constitutional or the Redistricting Commission to give us a constitutional map? Absolutely none. All right, so that's how that all transpired. So fast forward, and in my very first opinion, it was written by Justice Melody Stewart. And I wrote a concurring opinion, and I reminded Ohioans that we have this blessing. We have this part of our Constitution that gives the citizens the authority. It really gives meaning to the first words of our Constitution, we the people. They're identical to the first words of the United States Constitution, we the people. And the people are energized right now, which I'm really happy to see. So anyway, we get through 2022. I left the court December 31st, 2022. There's a provision in the Constitution that once you reach the age of 39, you can't be a judge anymore. Well, I blew past that. Anyway. So I left, but I said, I'm gonna work on this in retirement, and I did have every intention, but I also had intention to take 4 months off, and just see what it's like to have absolutely nothing to do, and then I'll start working on it. Well, my first redistricting meeting was January 5th. I never got to take my 4 months off, but so many people were just so eager. to address this problem. And with those numbers and those organizations and supporters have done nothing but grown since then, the support that we've received. So I worked with what I like to say, just a bunch of brainiacs, lawyers that have done this for, they were experts on legislation and constitutional amendments when it comes to redistricting and election law. We had the Harvard election, clinic involved in this. You name it, we had, as I said, brilliant brainiacs working on this. And we had Zooms, and we came up with, this amendment after surveying all of the commissions in the country, so that we were able to see what's the good, what's the bad, what would work in Ohio potentially, what wouldn't work in Ohio, and we came up with what we have now that you're going to, I'm sure you're all familiar with, and it'll be on the ballot in November. Then we had to go through the hoops of the signatures and all that sort of thing. But right from the get-go, there was pushback. There wasn't a universal thought that this is a pretty good thing. We should do this. We should listen to the people of the state of Ohio. We should listen to the people who elected us. No, that wasn't what was done. And we've seen the pushback grow and grow and grow, and at every turn. Well, one of the things that has to be done when you put a measure on the ballot, a constitutional measure on the ballot, is for ballot language to be drawn. And is anybody familiar with what happened last Friday afternoon for the ballot language? In the constitutional amendment, it says that this amendment bans gerrymandering. Okay? Bans gerrymandering. I mean, you can't be any more clear than saying that. So the ballot language says that the new commission, and again, that's made up of 15 citizens, not politicians, 5 Ds, 5 Rs, and 5 independents, or not associated with either party. And it says, they are required to to gerrymander the maps. Those are the words that they are required to gerrymander. And 3 of the members of the ballot board said, that sounds good to me. And so 3-2, and they prevailed. Okay, that was Friday, probably about 5 o'clock maybe. Monday, we had our lawsuit filed in the Supreme Court. And it's a great lawsuit, and it's very, very well done. It's going to go before the Supreme Court, and they're going to have to make a decision. They're going to have briefs. They're going to, review the law. They're going to look at what the language is. And I hope that they're going to do the right thing. I hope it's unanimous, and I hope they push back and take a great big eraser to a lot of the words that are in that ballot language that are purposely in there to dissuade voters when they walk into the booth, the ballot booth, and look, at the ballot they have, and they're going to look at, okay, they're there to vote for the president, and they vote the senator and Supreme Court justices. I want to remind everybody there's going to be 3 positions of the Supreme Court that will need your vote. Then we get down to the issue. Only statewide issue that is on our ballot is issue 1, which is the redistricting, okay? And they've made it, instead of a very succinct description of what it says, we modeled the preferred ballot language after what the legislature drafted in 2015 and 2018 for the measures they passed. So we didn't just pluck this out of the air. We actually copied the style of what they said was, thumbs up back then. So we did that, and that was totally rejected as being inaccurate and not thorough and deceptive. So they said we have to have this 3-page ballot that we explanation that we have put together. What they are counting on is that people will go in there and they'll get ballot fatigue. That is what they want to see. They want to see, folks being excited, go in, the president and all the other offices that are going to be on there, and then you're going to get to the statewide ballot, and people are going to say, oh God, I have to read all that? I don't understand it. I'm just going to vote no. Okay? that's what they're hoping, that the citizens, and unfortunately, that's well-founded reasoning, because when people go in and they see this language, they see pages, they see paragraphs, they say, no, I'm not going to vote. I'm going to vote no. And that's why our job, they've made our job more difficult. I won't deny it. And we have to educate much more thoroughly than what we anticipated we would have to do. We thought that we would get, relatively benign ballot language, and then we were just talking about the merits, right? Well, now we've got to, educate people to discern what you read. Don't believe everything you read, especially, if it's going to be in the ballot in the booth. And so that's one of the tasks that we have at hand. And so our strategy is, let's get out there with our message. Let's get out there early. Let's get out there relentlessly. Let's get out there often. And let's make it so people are so familiar with State Issue 1 that when they go into the ballot box, booth, and they're going to be looking at and they're going to go, boom, 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 I voted this, Issue 1, vote yes, and then move on to, whatever after Issue 1. That's what we have to, they don't even have to read the ballot language because they know what it's about to begin with. Fortunately, we have great supporters. We have, bought a lot of airtime that will start, in September. And it's going to be on, and people ask this all the time, where are you going to advertise? Well, where aren't we going to advertise? It's going to be digital. It's going to be people using their social media. It's going to be on television, radio. You open your mailbox, you're going to see messages from us. And we have that in place. And it's, I'm optimistic. I'm going to not be, I don't want to be, pessimistic and close my remarks by saying that, woe is us, we've got this challenge and how are we ever going to do it? We've got momentum, we've got excitement, and in a way, what they did on Friday and the support that unconstitutional ballot language got from all of the, statewide, commentators, the members of the legislature, the statewide office holders, thumbs up, that's great. And they're helping us because the citizens of Ohio are angered by this. They're angered that once again, their representatives, the people they sent to Columbus to represent them and to do good for society, has thumbed their nose at what is good for Ohio, and instead are driving towards what is good for politicians. And, it energizes. It energizes people. It brings people who weren't that interested to begin with, or, peripherally. It's like, well, we're not letting them get away with that. How many times have we had people that come out and, last night we had a Zoom. How many of you were able to, get on that Zoom? But we had, well over 400 people. We had to get a new Zoom address because the first one wasn't going to accommodate all the people that wanted to be on that Zoom. So that's indicative of the fact that I, in my heart, think this is going to pass. I pray that it's going to pass. I have confidence that it's going to pass, but it's not going to be easy. And that's where all of you come in, because you're concerned citizens. You wouldn't be in this room if you weren't concerned citizens, if you didn't want to be messengers, if you didn't want to be able, and I beg that you do this, talk to as many people, use your social media, your connections, whether it's at work or church or neighborhood, family, whatever. And bring it up and let people know that right? Because they may just say, oh, it's too complicated. I don't want to learn about it. Okay, let me, here's 5 points I want to tell you, friend, about this constitutional amendment and why it's, so good. And then remind them of what happened in August of 23 and what happened in November of 23. And remind them that the initiative in August was put on there by the legislature. It was not a citizens-driven, to take your right to pass a constitutional amendment that is initiated by the citizens, you had to have 60% of the people that vote to say yes, rather than 50 plus 1. 50 plus 1 was good enough for everything else that we vote on, including the governor, the secretary of state, and everybody else is coming out in support of the 60%. That's nonsense. So anyway, the Ohioans got the message, they rejected it, and then in November, they rejected it as well. And I want to say, I want to close by something that I found very disturbing when I heard it initially, and now I use it all the time, is that when the supermajority was created in the legislature, and again, I don't like the supermajority in the legislature because it really tilts the balance. We're supposed to have 3 co-equal branches of government, yet we have this provision that if you have a supermajority in the legislature, you can override the veto of the governor, which makes the governor, in many instances, kind of less than powerful, I'll say. So Mr. Huffman, who's the president of the Senate at the time, was quoted in the newspaper as saying, we can kind of do whatever we want. Now that we've got this super legislature, by gosh, we can kind of do whatever we want. And I say, is that we the people, or is that we the politicians you're talking about, Mr. Huffman? So with that, thank you.
So, warming up still. I want to briefly thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this event, and the Chief Justice for being here and taking questions. We put out a solicitation for questions, and there is a ton of interest, as evident by the huge group of people here, and we received dozens of questions online, via email, via social media. So, as you said, it's important for people to understand what they're voting on. So as succinctly as possible, the number one thing people have is that there's a 15-member commission. Where do they come from? Who appoints that 15-member commission? Who decides who these people are that are making this important decision? 15
people are citizens. They're not to be associated with positions of government, etc. They are citizens who volunteer to be considered to be on this 15-person commission. They are selected this way. I don't know how many applications we're going to get. I think quite a few. We will have quite a few. And they will then be reviewed by 4 retired judges. Those 4 retired judges cannot be politically active in their retirement, and they can't have family members that are members of, elected or work for the state or a political party, etc. So they have to be neutral. And of course, their careers means that they've had to be neutral as judges. So we're going to have 2 Republican registered retired judges and 2 Democratic registered retired judges who will be selected by the ballot board. All right, because on the ballot board you got 2 Ds and 2 Rs. They're appointed by the legislature. What is excluded in that that configuration of who selects the judges is that the ballot board minus Frank LaRose. So the Secretary of State will not be part of the selection of these judges. And there's a reason why we use the ballot board, but it's not important, but we did it for stability, actually. And so they will select the 2 Ds and 2 Rs. The folks, the Republican members of the ballot board will select 8 members, 8 judges from that are Democrat registered, and the Democrats will select the Republican registered judges, and so then we'll whittle it down from there. So there's, it goes back and forth, and it's fair. And so these judges then have the responsibility of reviewing the applications that come in. They don't do it in a vacuum. The redistricting commission, they'll have a director, they'll have support, administrative assistants. They have to hire a company that is experienced in vetting people looking at their backgrounds, making sure they say who they are, making sure that they're not politically active, and then the names will all be public, so neighbors and friends and coworkers who know these people will be able to say, excuse me, they're not neutral, they're very engaged in politics. They circulate petitions, they put signs in their yards, they do all this other stuff. They're not neutral, and that will exclude them from consideration. So then they whittle it down to 45 members of, 15, 15, and 15. And of that body of people, then there will be a drawing for members of the commission. 6 members of the commission will be randomly selected, 2, 2, and 2. And they will then select the 9 other members of the commission. These 6 will come together, again, supported by the redistricting personnel, I guess I'll call it, and they will then select the other 9 members. So there'll be 15 in all. So there's no politicians involved unless you count the retired judges as politicians, but as judges we all take the oath that we're not going to let politics interfere in how we've made these are men and women who have devoted their careers to making impartial decisions, and we're gonna make sure that those are the people that are going to be making the calls on the membership of this commission.
So the ballot board chooses the judges, the retired judges. The retired judges begin with a large group of people.
They're going to vet and whittle it down to the 15 members of the commission. Yes.
And obviously, retired judges, does that include you? Do you expect to become?
Nope. Because you have to have been retired for 6 years and not been involved in politics or anything for 6 years. There's some other. No, I wouldn't qualify. No.
So and actually most of the questions here did have to do with how that group is chosen, so I do appreciate that. One of the criticisms that you hear a lot is its emphasis on proportionality. Some people have said that it bakes gerrymandering into the process. You mentioned this earlier, the criticism that it creates gerrymandering to do away with gerrymandering. Why not create a process that is blind to partisan lean, that doesn't actually even look at partisan lean and just looks at framing districts around communities?
Well, the misrepresentation is that partisan considerations is primary and everything else is secondary to that, and that's not how it's stated in the Constitution. That is patently untrue. Right now, the 2 constitutional amendments we have, the way we select now, there is a proportionality built into that, and it is in all the other constitutional commissions that we have. It's actually I don't know of one that doesn't have that consideration in it, because it's a reflection of the voters. All right, what's in order to have fairness, in order to have a reflection of the pattern of voters, there has to be a consideration, somewhat of a consideration of voting patterns. And this takes it back 6 years. You look at the elections in the even years for 6 years, and you look and see how many positions were won by Democrats and how many positions were won by Republicans, and that gives you the ratio. But keep in mind, the primary goal is to keep your districts contiguous. That means they touch one another, and if you look at the maps that we have now, they might touch with a little sliver, in between 2 big, portions of, and then they've got this little sliver in between, and they call that contiguous. Nonsense. So we're contiguous, and it has considerations for, as I said, the proportionality, but the main goal is to have competitive districts. All right? The more competitive districts we have, the fairer it will be, and the more of a balance that we're going to see in Columbus, and I might add in the representatives that we send to Congress. we shouldn't have supermajorities. And if this redistricting is done correctly, we're not going to have supermajorities in Ohio. We're going to have a balanced number of legislators that are going to be incentivized to work with one another. And it's not going to be, hey, we can pretty much do whatever we want. That's not going to happen. That's what the goal of this is. So don't let the complaint or the pointing out that, well, that's, you know, they're paying attention to politics and politics overrides everything. That's absolutely false. Read the Constitution. It doesn't say that at all, any more than it says that the commission is obligated to gerrymander the districts. This is just what is being put out there.
So you mentioned the goal being fairness. Now, to be clear, like the voting patterns in Ohio would lead to a General Assembly that leads conservative, right? Is that...
There probably will be more, conservative members of the General Assembly. Yes, that's just a fact of life, based on the voting patterns. Will it always be that way? I don't know. I don't know how Ohioans are going to vote in the future. But that's not my concern. I'm not here to put my thumb on the scale and say, oh, I want to have, this many districts that are represented by Democrats and this many, by Republicans. That is not my concern. I want the process to be fair. I want it to be neutral. I don't want to have what we have now, which is redistricting gerrymandering that begets redistricting gerrymandering. It is just over and over a pattern, and you can't eradicate it. The only way to eradicate it is through a change in the Constitution, change in the way that our districts, our voting districts, are drawn. And I went on a tour, kind of self-guided, through the 6th Congressional District a couple weeks ago. Started down in Marietta, drove all the way up, Massillon, Steubenville, ended up in Youngstown. Okay, I got to tell you, there is very little that Marietta has in common with Youngstown. Just take my word for it. And the communities going up the stretch, it's all up the right side of the state of Ohio. And why was it drafted that way? Why was it drawn? So that they could maintain it as a red congressional district. Okay, you're going to hear, and I'm going to probably beat you to the punch on the question, because somebody's going to say, well, weren't they sued, and they had redistricting, and they had a citizens commission, and then it got taken to federal court, and federal court said, yeah, the districts you drew around Detroit are unconstitutional when it comes to the makeup of racial makeup of the citizenry. All right, the reason that happened is not because of the commission, but because of the people that were advising the commission. They hired people who were not knowledgeable of what they were required to do, what the Constitution required in Michigan, and what the rules and regulations were for how the commission operated. And so they went to federal court, and federal court said, yep, you got to redo those districts, and okay, they're redoing the districts. The system worked, okay? That won't happen in Ohio, because we will not make that same mistake. When I say we, the members of the commission and the director of the support staff, etc., are going to vet everybody who wants to be involved with our commission to make sure that they're on the top of their game, that they know what they're doing, that they have a reputation, and they have experience. And that's what this unit is going to look like. And I might add, currently, this system that the legislature and all the statewide office holders want us to perpetuate, what we have now, there's a lawsuit in the federal courts over that 6th congressional district that I was talking about, filed by minority members, talking about the fact that it was gerrymandered to the disadvantage of them and their communities. So, the fact that the people in opposition, the legislature, and Frank LaRose, et cetera, are pointing and say, oh, look at Michigan, citizens commissions don't work. Well, if that's your, position, well then obviously what you folks have put in the Constitution doesn't work either. If you're going to look at lawsuits, you got to look at the basis for the lawsuit and the outcome.
And well, that brings up one of the questions people have brought about the commission itself and accountability. Like, if the commission does something people don't like, one of the criticisms has been that there's no way to recall those commission members. What accountability is there for the people on the commission?
Okay, when you say accountability, they can be removed from the commission if someone is not doing their job or they're not. There's a variety of reasons why they could be removed. They can be removed by the other commission members, and there's a process built into the Constitution to allow for that. So they're not in, and there's no way that you can eliminate them if a mistake was made in selecting them, or they've decided that they just don't want to participate fully or whatever. Now, keep in mind that this is not going to be an easy job to be on the commission. You're going to have to be a member of a 15-member panel. You're going to have public hearings in the 4 corners of Ohio and in central Ohio. So 5 districts. You're going to have to go around. You're going to have to take evidence. You're going to have to listen to what people, are talking about. They're going to have to tell you why their community is a community of interest and why it should be kept together. Why my village should be kept together and not, split, divided in any way. Maybe why my school district is a community of interest and why we don't want to see our school district, split apart and be in, 2 different districts for the General Assembly. There's a district, there's a school district, and I think it's outside of Youngstown, and they have 2 school buildings in this little school district. And one school building is in one district, and the other school building is another district, and that's all that school district is made up of. So, we will listen to people when they say, please keep our school districts.
Like I said, we put a Google form online, and there were lots of questions received, and one of the trends that we heard about was, is there anything that is going to prevent the General Assembly or the governor from undoing this after it passes?
Yes. They cannot remove a constitutional amendment. The only way a constitutional amendment can be repealed is through another statewide vote. That's why this constitutional amendment that you're going to vote on in November repeals those constitutional amendments that were passed in 2015 and 2018. And the entire language for both of those constitutional amendments, both of those part of the Ohio Constitution, are contained in the language of the statute, or excuse me, the amendment that we had to draft. So it makes it twice as long as if we're just looking at the language, the new language, it makes it twice as long. And that's, you're going to hear the complaint that, oh my gosh, this is 13,000 words in this. Well, half of them are the removal of the old, the what we want to get rid of. And that has to be, contained in there as well. And as I said earlier, the federal Constitution, that's another complaint. Look at the federal Constitution, it's only 7,000 words. And here we're just trying to, they're trying to confuse and draw your attention to things that are absolutely irrelevant. The Constitution of the United States is a document, as I said, that is a limiting document. The constitutions of the state are enabling documents. They have to spell out in much more detail how the state will be run. And so they have things in there that are very detailed and peculiar or just for the state of Ohio. The state of Ohio is not the state of Oregon and so we have differences. We have differences in how our court systems are, created and some of the laws and, we've got 50 states and yes, they are all under the umbrella of the federal government, but they are different.
And somebody's passed along a good question here. What is the term of a commission member? Is it a lifelong appointment? Or?
No, because I'm glad that was asked because you're going to hear that, they're going to be serving, forever and they're never, no. The commission will be created in 2025 once this amendment is passed in 2024. 2025, and then they really have their work cut out because they have to come together. They have to then draft a map, Okay, but in the meantime, they have to have those meetings all around the state. Once a map is drafted, then they have to go back around the state with the draft so people can comment on the draft of that map. And so there's going to be a lot of action that they have to do. Okay, then that map will be presented by the commission. The map is subject to challenge by a citizen, just like the map would be, under the current, configuration of the Constitution. And that goes to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court would have to review what is being alleged of, why this map is contrary to the Constitution. But the Supreme Court would have to find that the commission abused their discretion in drawing that map, which I think is a pretty hard thing to demonstrate, that a commission of 15 people abused their discretion. So then the map will pass. I mean, it'll pass muster with the court. It will then become the map that is going to be used in 2026. That's why it has to be drafted and everything in place for 2026 election. That map then will be used until the next census is done in 2030. All right. So there's no more job for the commission. They're disbanded at that point. There's no maps to be drawn for the rest of the decade. Okay, then you get to 2030 and the census, and we have the numbers that are pertinent to Ohio, and then another map has to be drafted, and then the commission is brought together again. Will it be the same members? I don't think so, because I think that there's going to be people that for whatever reason they're not going to serve again. Then we're going to have the 4 judges come together again and do that whole vetting process in order to find members for this commission. So it's going to be fresh faces each decade. It might be 15 new fresh faces each decade. But the same process will be in place for the selection. The same arm's length neutrality will be in place, for each new map for the decade. Once the map is drawn and, it's survived any court challenge, that's good for 10 years. And, until the next census. And there's not going to be this constant bickering back and forth that you've seen over the last, last, 5-6 years.
Are the commission members paid?
Yes, they are paid. They're paid, I believe it is $125 a day. Yeah, that's not a whole lot, is it, for what we're asking of them to do? But yes, they are. Now, let me follow that up with a comment about the budget, because one of the criticisms you're going to hear is blank check. There's going to be a bunch of bureaucrats that are going to get rich off of the taxpayer money. That's what this whole system is about. Absolutely not true. We put a limit on the budget, okay? In the Constitution, there's a limit. I insisted on that because I knew exactly what they were going to say, unaccountable, blank check, etc. So we tallied what was spent by the Redistricting Commission in 2022 and all the litigation and everything they paid for in fighting for those 7 unconstitutional maps. What it cost them to go to the federal court, the whole thing, $7 million. So we have there in the Constitution, you can't exceed $7 million. If it was good enough for them, it's good enough going forward. And you don't have to spend $7 million. Nobody's saying that you've got to, exhaust your funds, but that's what, that's what you have to do that. And that's only fair.
Another concern that's been raised by some people is who's bankrolling this initiative. Much of the money that's gone towards citizens, not politicians, has come from out of state, much of that from dark money groups. Why should Ohioans not be concerned about? I was wondering that. Test. Okay, I don't know how to use a microphone. I apologize. We're going to rephrase all the questions. We're starting from the beginning.
Did you hear me, though? That's the important part.
Right. True. So to repeat, the question was, who is bankrolling this initiative? Much of the money that has gone towards citizens, not politicians, has come from out of state. Much of that has come from dark money groups. Why should Ohioans not be concerned about those funds?
You know, the concern for democracy doesn't stop at the borders of Ohio. And democracy doesn't stop at the borders of our country. I know. I'm right now involved with an initiative in Ukraine to vet judges for their constitutional court. I've been to Ukraine 5 times since November. I go to Kyiv, all right? You know what's happening in Kyiv. But I do it to operate with 5 other appointed people. I was appointed by the USAID, our State Department as well, to vet candidates to make sure that the men and women that are going to be on their constitutional court deserve to be on the constitutional court, because Ukraine is trying to strengthen their democracy. They want to do that because they want to be part of the EU. They want to be part of NATO. They want to survive the onslaught of Russia. Okay, so the world is, is concerned with democracy. Democracy does not, the concerns for democracy, and I have no problem if an organization that is dedicated to democracy, such as the Kettering, although Kettering is not a contributor, I'm not pointing them out and saying that, but any organization in this country that is concerned with democracy being fair, with our government being elected by the people, for the people, and wants to fight gerrymandering, I've got no problem with what they contribute. Absolutely none, and no Ohioan should.
So overwhelmingly, a majority of the questions we have here have to do with this commission and who's how they're going to be chosen. So can you talk more about how we make sure these people are citizens, not politicians? Like, what sort of political activity could they not have donated to any partisan campaigns? Like,
And all those restrictions are in the amendment of what they can, how involved they can be, et cetera. We don't want politicians, we don't want lobbyists, we don't want their family members, we don't want people who have worked in a congressman's office or, work for the legislator. We don't want, people who make money from, the government. Folks that are, suppliers, for example, that have that kind of connection, not only with the state of Ohio and then local governments, but political parties. We want to make sure that we're not getting ward council member, all people that are intimately involved. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. And I applaud people who are active in their communities, active in their wards, get out the vote in their, their cities and counties. And yes, absolutely. As a former county office holder, and obviously a statewide office holder, I applaud those people. We who stand for election could not succeed if we didn't have people who, were willing to do that. But there's nothing wrong with picking a side either. There's nothing wrong to say, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican or I'm an independent. Quite frankly, over 70% of our voters in the state of Ohio are independents. As much as you hear about D's and you hear about R's, the vast majority of our voters are independents. To your question, you just have to make sure that they're neutral. They registered to vote. They vote in the last, I think it's 6 elections. There's a part about participating in the elections. You can't have just registered to vote and then say, I want to be on the commission. You have to have a history of being an engaged citizen in the state. And then you can obviously put your name in application. We're going to have an application. The application is going to be written and it's going to require it's not going to be multiple choice, it's going to be essay questions. Remember, that's how you took your test? Is it going to be essay or multiple choice? We want essays because we want people to be able to intelligently explain why they want to be on this commission. What is their reasoning for it, and what do they bring to the table? What do they bring? And I want people to think. I just don't want anybody to say, well, I'm going to volunteer for that. And we want people who want to be there, because this is going to be a lot of work. Let me also say that we want balance on this commission. We don't want 15, suburban white people on the commission. That would be absolutely not acceptable. So it's going to be demographically and geographically balanced. And that's part of the selection process.
So there's 5 Ds, 5 Rs, and 5 others. Those others aren't necessarily independents. They could be libertarian.
They could be Libertarian, Green Party, whatever.
So somebody had asked me, if you have 5 Ds and 5 Rs and 5 others, the others are basically have all the power, don't they? I mean, they have the tie-breaking vote between the other two.
Well, so you're saying that you could have 5 Ds band together with the independents, and then the Rs would be out.
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa, but no, because in order for things to happen, there's language in the Constitution that says that can't happen. That in order for something to pass, you have to have a positive vote from the Rs, a positive vote from the Ds, and the independents. So it's to guard against exactly what you're saying. That was thought of.
Circling back slightly to something I mentioned earlier, the petition language says the commission will be prohibited from drawing districts that discriminate against or favor any political party. How is it possible to draw districts that achieve proportionality without drawing some of them to favor one party or the other?
Okay. There's a difference between competitive districts that are basically 50-50 or some configuration of that, and respecting voting, the ratio that I talked about, for the non-competitive districts. When we were looking at the maps that were drawn, in 2022, they took a ratio. I think they worked with 56, or was it 54-46? That was the the voting pattern for the last 10 years. That's what 54% of the statewide office holders were Republican, and 54, and then 46 were Democrats. And that's just how when you do the numbers, the number of votes that were cast. Okay, and so the requirement was you're going to have that ratio respected. So you have a column of D districts and a column of R districts. Interestingly, if a district was 50.003, in favor of Democrats, 50.003 percentage, that was in the D column. All right. That's a competitive district. That's not a district that's leaning Democrat. Now, for the R column, their districts were drawn to be nowhere near 50.003. It was more like 52, 53, 57%. All right. So do you see what I'm talking about? How that maneuvering is so unfair, and that will not be possible in this process that we have.
So it's not designed to guarantee a certain number of districts to one party versus the other?
No, it should not be. In fact, I wish it was guaranteed that we'll have nothing but neutral districts, but that's an impossibility. That's an absolute impossibility. One of the things that transpires under the current system is what they call cracking and packing, where they will take a concentration of voters and they always say urban voters. They're going to be Democratic voters, and then they would divide the city or the area, and then they would take a quarter of those voters and they would link them to communities, non-urban communities, in fact, rural communities, and those were populated mostly by white voters. And that dilutes the strength, the vote of the folks that they cracked doing that. The other method was to pack them, to make sure that they're all in one district, and so they only get one representative. So you limit the number of representatives they can have, the influence of this political party or that political party, and that's theoretically is not going to happen, because these maps will be take into consideration communities of interest, and that's going to be based on evidence, testimony, folks that come before them to offer reasons why their communities should not be separated, that they should be kept together.
is there a priority, like communities of interest, compactness, proportionality, like?
Okay, it's not like a hierarchy, like, first you've got to do this, then you look at this, but it's contiguous. They have to be, touching one another. They have to, which lends itself to being, together. All right, and there's a limitation then on the geography, I guess I would call it. And then they have to, take into consideration, contiguous communities of interest, and then they have to have a reflection of what we were talking about. It's being overly emphasized that it's going to have a political, it's going to be a political driving force in order to get a certain ratio in each county. But that's not the way it works. That's not how it's going to be.
So those factors are weighted equally, the things you mentioned.
Yeah.
One of the things that multiple readers have asked about, or noted, I should say, is that we, in 2015, we're told we're going to vote to end gerrymandering. 2018, we're going to vote to end gerrymandering. And here we are again. How is this going to be different from the last couple times we voted for this?
Well, in 2015, the legislature got together and said, hey, guys, let's just do a constitutional amendment. Oh, let's draw it ourselves. Let's, put it all together, and then we'll have the voters vote on it. And like I said, nobody opposed it. And that worked so well. Let's do it again in 2018. We'll just draw it amongst ourselves at the legislature, okay? And then we'll put it out there for the citizens to vote on. And since 2015 was such a success, nobody's going to object to 2018, what we're doing. And that's what they did. Those two amendments were drafted by the legislature. And as I said, they had the Trojan horse built into it. They were self-serving. It was a preservation of a system that allowed for supermajorities. Okay. Fast forward to what's going to be on the ballot in November. And it's a citizens' initiative. It is drafted by people who are concerned with fairness and empowering citizens, returning the power to the citizens, not the politicians. That's the motivation. Fairness. That was not the motivation in 2015 and 2018. Yeah, it was great to say this is going to fix gerrymandering, but it didn't. It didn't, because it was designed not to.
Another question we heard from several people. This, you mentioned studying what was done elsewhere in other states. What's the most comparative state where this specific method was tried, if there's something comparable, and what issues, if any, have they faced there?
Well, Michigan. Michigan was 2018 is when their constitutional amendment, and they, okay, why did we select Michigan? Well, there's a lot of similarities, between the states, and it was a citizen initiative, and it was a citizen the commission was made up of citizens. And one of the things I liked about Michigan right off the bat was they were challenged early on in their Supreme Court, and they prevailed against all the challengers. So I thought, well, this system has been tested, and we want to adopt some of the similarities or into Ohio's, and they've already been tested in a court, so that's a good thing. Then you look at the other commissions and whether they're truly the type of commission that would work in the state of Ohio. Now remember, our goal, driving force, was to get politicians out of the redistricting process. Okay, you've all heard about the Iowa. The governor was on at a press conference saying, hey, let's just do what Iowa does. And if you take a look at Iowa, well, first of all, let's talk about Iowa versus Ohio. I know a lot of people, especially not familiar with all the states in the country, they think Iowa is Ohio and Ohio is Iowa. They get confused with the names. But anyway, Ohio has, almost 12 million people. Iowa has 3 million, I think. Maybe 4 at most. 88% white. And the minorities in Iowa, they don't even... When I looked at the stats for Iowa, they don't even say, the black community and what percentage it is. They're lumped in with Hispanic and Native American, et cetera. So there is a very, very small percentage of Iowans who are diverse. And then they have this system where they draw the maps and they draw the maps. And if the maps are challenged by the legislature, and they get 2 chances to do it, the commission gets 2 chances to do it, and then a map has to be drawn that the legislature approves. So you're not taking politicians out of the process here. You're just making the path to get to the legislators longer, maybe a little more circuitous, but eventually the decision lands up in the lap of the legislators. That's diametrically opposed to what our message is. We don't want politicians putting their thumbs on the scale, just like we saw the politicians putting their thumbs on the scale for the drawing of the ballot language. If there's any example as to why we need this constitutional amendment, look what happened last Friday afternoon. That cannot be. And yet, that's what our elected officials decided that's going to be how we're going to deal with this ballot measure. To be deceptive, to be disingenuous, to purposely be untruthful, and that benefits just a small group of people, and they're called legislators.
So, Josh, can you pick your next best question?
We're running out of time, and people are getting restless.
All right.
The natives
The
are
library
restless.
wants us out of here so they can clean all the books. So yeah, one good question here from the audience that I almost missed. So I'm glad I got one more chance to ask the question. If this initiative fails, what would it look like in the future? What would, in terms of the current maps, in terms of 2030, what does the future look like if this amendment does not pass?
I don't know. I'll be in France. I'm not going to look. No, the system we have now. We're going to have exactly, the constitutional amendments. The configuration of our Constitution right now will be what we have for, when the census comes around in 2030. They're going to use, the 15 and the 18 amendments that are embedded in our Constitution now. Those will be, that'll be the path for drawing the maps in Ohio. So, unless there's another citizens initiative somewhere down the road, which there could be, but it's a really hard thing to do. That's why when I, want to champion, the groups and organizations that are championing what we're doing, and they're part of it, the League and Common Cause and, so many others, and Kettering being so interested in it, and educating folks, it's a hard thing to do. So I respect the people that have put their hand up and said, count me in. I want to help my state become a better place to live, a better place to for my children and my grandchildren. And that's the motivation. And there's nothing in it for me. I'm not getting anything out of, this constitutional amendment whatsoever, except that I'm going to live in a state that I hope will not be so extreme in their policy making, that will respect the citizens and not try to jam policy down the throats of Ohioans when Ohioans then finally, get the chance to, push back. They say at the polls, no, we don't want that. I want that kind of Ohio. I want that kind of America. And so you got to start someplace, and that's why we're doing it.
Wasn't that great?
Thank you. Thank you.
Unfortunately, due to our time restraints, we may not have gotten to every question, but I will tell you, if you want to find out more about the proposed amendment, you can go to the Citizens Not Politicians website. They probably have more information there than you'll ever need, but it'll be there. We also want to express really our true appreciation and thanks to the former Supreme Court Justice Maureen O'Connor, and to our moderator, Josh Swigert, for sharing their valuable knowledge and insights about this very important proposed amendment. This amendment, as we all know, our proposed amendment will be on the ballot as issue 1 in November. So now that you have a better understanding of the proposed amendment, please share what you have learned with your family, friends, and colleagues. We are grateful for all of those who have fought for the years for fair districts and who continue to fight. And one of the most ardent champions is with us tonight, Catherine Trusser from the Common Cause of Ohio. Catherine, stand up. So in closing, we want to thank DATV for recording this program, Sharon Davies for introducing our speaker, the media who all came here to learn, and to all the volunteers who were involved in planning and execution of this event, and especially to Elizabeth Warner from the League of Women Voters of Ohio, who played a vital role in coordinating all the logistics and promotion for this event. And Elizabeth's standing over there. And I also want to acknowledge thanks to Misty Thomas Trout, who's an associate professor in graphic design at the University of Dayton, who has helped the League create those wonderful posters about gerrymandering that are on display in the library. So last but not least, I want to thank all of you who cared enough to come tonight and to become informed voters. Don't forget to check your registration and make sure you're still registered, and then make your plan to vote. So enjoy the rest of your evening, stay safe, and keep healthy.
You know, I should have mentioned that the website, citizensnotpoliticians.org, and that's if you want to volunteer, go to that site, sign up, you'll be contacted. There's just a wealth of information on it, and it will continually being updated and more information. And you can contact, obviously, our initiative through that website. So take a look at it, citizensnotpoliticians.org.